Welcome, everyone. My name is Jen Laskowski, and I am the Digital Experience Consultant here at Marigold. Today's session is eResources Troubleshooting Back to Basics. So this afternoon, we will be looking at some of the basic first steps you can take when troubleshooting, how you can avoid having to troubleshoot some eResources in the future, some common eResources that we tend to troubleshoot a lot, along with some helpful tips and links you can turn to for help. There will also be time at the end of the presentation if you have questions. So with that, we can start looking at some troubleshooting basics. Troubleshooting is a common issue that you will most likely face in your library. Whether it's an e-resource, an e-reader, or a mobile app, you can be prepared to help library patrons solve their problems. While we want to fix every issue possible, keep in mind that sometimes there is no solution. Not all systems are user-friendly on every device. We can't make changes to mobile apps, e-resources, or devices, and sometimes they will have glitches. A person's Wi-Fi connection could also be causing the issue, which is quite common in our rural communities, but it is something else that we can't always fix. So technology isn't perfect, so we can't expect to be either. Another important note is that the solutions won't always be instantaneous. Some solutions are quick, but sometimes we will have to contact our eResources reps or technical support directly for an issue. Patience is key when it comes to troubleshooting. So we know it happens to us all, and there are some things we can do about it. Let's look at some of the very basic first steps you can take when troubleshooting an issue. Sometimes troubleshooting can be as easy as helping patrons who have forgotten their PIN number. The first step when troubleshooting is to always make sure the patron is using the correct login information. This could include their library card barcode number, their PIN number or password, and their email address. Your patron should have their library card number and PIN, but if not, you can easily look up their barcode number and reset their PIN in Polaris. If it is an e-resource that requires them to create a password, you can always encourage them to use the Forgot Your Password option. When it comes to their email address, I always encourage patrons to use the same email address that is associated with their library card for all e-resources and devices that they may use. This makes it easy to remember, and then you can also have that information in your records. While this is not required, I do always encourage it as it can help make the process easier. If a library patron is using an eResources app, mobile device, or tablet, make sure that everything is up to date. Sometimes apps and devices will not run properly if they are not updated to the most current version. So this is a really easy step to help ensure things are running properly. Now we've all probably heard the question, have you tried turning it off and on? And the same can be said for using eResources. Whether you're using the mobile app or a browser on your device, closing and relaunching the app can sometimes help refresh things. Again, sometimes technology has glitches and doesn't work perfectly. If relaunching doesn't work, you can try logging out and back into the eResource. For an eResource like Libby, where you add your library card, you can try removing your card and re-adding it. Like I said at the beginning, sometimes a small, simple change can really help. Lastly, if nothing else works, you can uninstall and reinstall a mobile app. However, this should be your last resort after you have tried all the previous steps. So these are some very basic first steps you can take when troubleshooting. They're really simple and straightforward, but again, sometimes a small reset can make a big difference when troubleshooting. We always want to try the simplest steps first. Now, I'm sure for many of us, troubleshooting can be intimidating, and you might be wondering how you can avoid it completely. Well, we can't actually avoid it completely, but there are some steps you can take to help limit troubleshooting in the future. Specifically, let's look at when a patron gets a new library card. When a patron needs to get a new library card, it can cause issues with some of the e-resources because patrons will use their library card to sign into the majority of e-resources. When they receive a new card, it can cause an overlap in some e-resources, creating multiple accounts for patrons. And obviously, we know most patrons just want one account for all of their information in an e-resource. cloudLibrary, OverDrive, Libby, Freegal Music, and Hoopla are the main e-resources you will need to make changes to if a library patron receives a new card. To ensure that your patrons can still access their account, you will need to contact Marigold and remind your patrons of these changes. So let's take a closer look at the required changes that will help us avoid having to troubleshoot in the future. To save a patron's cloudLibrary, OverDrive, and Libby information, such as items out, holds, their reading history, and all of that information, library staff will need to fill out the OverDrive and cloudLibrary barcode merge request form on the Marigold website. Simply enter your contact information in case we need to contact you due to an issue. Select the platforms that the patron uses their library card for. And if a patron is unsure if they have used either OverDrive or cloudLibrary in the past, you can select both just in case. Since they won't be using their old library card anyways, there's no harm in trying to merge it. Lastly, include their old barcode and the new barcode so we can easily merge their accounts. Ensuring that a patron's cloudLibrary and OverDrive accounts are merged with their new library card number will help to eliminate problems in the future, especially when they start trying to borrow items. Just be sure that if your patron uses any eResources mobile apps or an e-reader, that their library card information is updated there as well. Now, if a patron comes in for a new card and they are a Freegal Music mobile app user, they will need to back up their Freegal Music account before you give them a new card. Patrons who download Freegal Music using the mobile app will need to back up their files to a computer, or those files will be lost once their new barcode has been saved in Polaris. As Freegal Music accounts are tied to a patron's barcode, lost files cannot be recovered. The only thing from Freegal Music that we can recover when a patron receives a new library card is their favorites, which is also known as their wish list, and their streaming playlist. So anything they've downloaded, if they didn't back it up, would be lost. Freegal Music must transfer those favorites or streaming playlists from the old card account to the new one directly. So if your patron wants this change, you will need to contact me directly and I will contact Freegal. So just remember that if your patron is a Freegal Music user, that they will need to make these changes before they get their new library card. So these are the main e-resources you need to be aware of for making changes when a patron gets a new library card. Taking these steps when a patron needs a new card can help eliminate troubleshooting in the future. This information can also be found in the Marigold manual under card replacement procedures. And if you need more information on where to find that or any of these e-resources, you can always contact me. Now, there are some common e-resources that we typically receive more questions about, making them the most popular and common e-resources to troubleshoot. If you can become comfortable troubleshooting these e-resources, you will probably be able to answer the majority of questions you receive. As a result, troubleshooting may not seem so intimidating anymore. Let's look at some of the most common e-resources to troubleshoot. So I've compiled this information based on questions I have received directly from library staff, as well as some IT tickets we have received over the last year. You can see at the top of my list that actually the most common problems aren't even an e-resource. It's Kobo e-readers and using Adobe digital editions. Even though we are talking about e-resources today, I wanted to include Kobo and Adobe in the list because they are the most common troubleshooting questions that we receive. We do have a Kobo webinar that is available for library staff to view along with a number of brochures. I will let you know that I am planning to do more in-depth troubleshooting in the future, and Kobo and Adobe will be included in that as well. But for today, let's look at some of these e-resources. And right at the top of the list, we have Libby. So Libby is the mobile app for OverDrive and has now replaced the OverDrive app completely as of May 1st. With the OverDrive app and the Recommend to Library feature being retired, there are more questions that come up about Libby capabilities. One of the most common questions that we receive is, can I access OverDrive content on Libby? The answer is yes, they have the same content. Libby is just the name for the OverDrive mobile app. All the content you see on the OverDrive website is available on Libby as well. So this is a really easy question to answer, but we get it quite frequently, so it's always important to know. Originally, you could not make recommendations for titles to purchase in Libby. However, that has now changed with the introduction of Notify Me tags. Notify Me tags allow patrons to express interest in titles not yet in the collection. If a patron clicks on the Notify Me tag, they will receive a notification when and if the title is added. We do have a Notify Me tags tutorial available on Niche Academy if you or other staff need more information. This is a new feature for Libby, so again, it's important to know this and stay up to date. With the switch from the OverDrive app to Libby, a lot of patrons want to know if they can access their reading history on Libby. And as of the beginning of June, Libby users can now access all their reading history in Libby. This update came about because many Libby users were requesting it, so we know that the eResource developers are listening, which is important. So this change should be automatic and your patrons shouldn't have to make any changes themselves. In fact, if you have a Libby account and you checked it right now, you should see any reading history that you previously had in OverDrive. The last and perhaps most common question is generally how to navigate Libby. Now, OverDrive and Libby have put together a great Libby help page to outline the basics of navigating Libby. And the more that you become familiar with using Libby, the easier it will be to help library patrons navigate. So I have included some links here that I will share in the chat, but I will also be sending you a helpful links and reminders sheet after this session that will have all of this information. With Libby, there are two things I would like to point out that will help you with troubleshooting. If you are unable to find a solution to your problem with Libby, you can submit a Libby help form. We encourage patrons to fill out this support form themselves because they can provide all of the details and will be contacted directly by Libby support for a solution to their problem. Having that direct contact between patrons and Libby support will help speed up their troubleshooting process. The other thing you can do on Libby is give a suggestion. In the Libby app, under Get Some Help, there is the option to submit to the suggestion box. If there's something you think could be improved or something you think could be added, we encourage you to submit to the suggestion box, as Libby will take patron feedback into consideration. So you can help them eliminate some of those confusing factors that your patrons see all the time using it. So those are just a few suggestions on where you can go for more help, and also how you can help make Libby more user-friendly. While Libby and OverDrive are the same, we still receive questions specifically about OverDrive and borrowing items. Library patrons can access OverDrive on their web browser if they prefer, as there is no longer a mobile app for OverDrive. It's just Libby. But perhaps the most common troubleshooting question I get out of everything is, why isn't my ebook working properly? Now, this typically happens with OverDrive items that people have added to their Kobo device to read on Adobe Digital Editions, or an ebook they checked out from OverDrive directly on their Kobo. More often than not, this requires that I reach out to OverDrive. Usually there is an issue with the ebook, and that's why it isn't working properly. If that is the case, you can reach out to me with all of the information. I always say the more information you can provide, the better. So be sure to include the patron's name and barcode number. Fully describe the issue and any steps you've taken so far. What device they were using, even if it is on their computer. And the name of the title that is causing the issue. OverDrive is typically fairly quick at responding, but it could take a few days to work the problem out. So this is a great example of something we can't fix right away, but it is still something that can be fixed. It just has to be done by OverDrive. So OverDrive does have some useful help articles on their website as well. But again, I've shared them in the chat, and I will share these links after the presentation as well. I've already talked a bit about Freegal Music and the importance of backing up your files before changing your library card. And that really is the most popular question for Freegal Music. But I will be sure to share some more helpful links for Freegal in my follow-up as well. We do receive the occasional question about Hoopla and PressReader, and it seems for these two eResources that it's always the same question. For Hoopla, we often see patrons who can't reset their password, and none of their known email addresses are working when they use the forgot your password option. Or it could be the opposite, where they know their password, but not their email. This is one instance where you would need to contact me. I would be able to check what email address is associated with their account. Additionally, if they wanted a different email address to be used, for example, if the current one is one they no longer use, I could change it for them. Now, PressReader's most common question is, why can't I access the Globe and Mail? And typically the answer is, it's an in-library access-only newspaper and patrons are trying to access it at home. This is a very simple question to answer, and while you may not think of it as a troubleshooting question, it is, because you're helping to eliminate the confusion with using that e-resource, and that is a lot of what troubleshooting is. I've included some more links to these eResources help pages, and I will also share them again in my follow-up. The troubleshooting for these e-resources usually isn't too complicated, but it's always important to know where to look when something arises. cloudLibrary is another popular e-resource that receives a few troubleshooting questions. Perhaps the most popular one is, why aren't my holds appearing in my account? This typically happens when a patron receives a new library card and their accounts aren't merged. So as I previously mentioned, you would need to complete the OverDrive Cloud Library barcode merge request form on the Marigold website. We encourage library staff to fill this form out as soon as a barcode is changed in order to ensure that the patron's account is up to date. This should help avoid any future issues. So there aren't often too many issues with cloudLibrary. Again, I have some links up that will be in the chat as well as in the follow-up. And again, it's always important to know where you can go for more help if something does happen. Perhaps one of the most frequent questions we receive with regards to all of the eBook platforms, especially OverDrive, Libby, and cloudLibrary, is why is it taking so long for me to get an item? Now, again, your first thought might be, well, this isn't really a troubleshooting question, but in fact it is. Troubleshooting is all about helping your patrons access e-resources and content as easily as possible. Being able to provide this information to your library patrons can help make their experience with e-resources better. Similar to a physical book in a library, ebooks are one copy per one user. This means that if we have 5 copies of an ebook, 5 people can check it out at once. Some ebooks will have less copies available, meaning fewer people can check them out. And this is typically due to high prices. Ebooks are quite expensive, and in order to ensure that we're purchasing enough popular materials, we need to carefully budget. If you want more information about ebooks and e-audiobooks and their availability in public libraries, you can visit eContent for libraries, and they have some great information there.